Right, welcome back. 20 minutes before 7 here on the program. The Congress of South African Trade Unions, that's Cosatu, has rejected Finance Minister Tito Mboweni's proposal to cut the public sector wage bill by over 160 billion rand to manage national debt. This comes after government's Tuesday proposal at the Public Service Co-ordinating Bargaining Council that the 2018 collective agreement on salary adjustments for the public sector should be reviewed. Cosatu says this is an attack on workers and the unions are threatening a public sector shutdown if workers don't get their salary increases in April. The three-year agreement that was reached in 2018 would see public sector salaries increase up to 7% in April this year. Now, the Federation's stance is that a review is non-negotiable. Sizwe Pamla, Cosatu spokesperson, is here in studio to engage us on this. Good to have you, Sizwe. Thanks. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
All right. I mean, I think we've gotten your reaction to all of this, but I think I'd like to get it again because you've now heard the budget speech. We're speaking to what was said the night before. The minister has spoken. What now?
Well, look, we're not parliamentarians, so we're not going to debate this in Parliament. We will make our submissions, but we are waiting for our government to come to the PSCBC because we have a standing agreement and we want that agreement to be implemented. Our position is clear. We are not going to allow a situation where workers are victimized because if you look at what is happening with government, the level of corruption in state entities, the wasteful expenditure. For an example, listen to the minister delivering the budget speech. He says nothing about what the Auditor General said. The municipalities spend something like 3.4 billion on consultants. He pretends as if the issue of consultants in the public entities, in government departments and municipalities is not a problem. And yet he's targeting civil servants. Even when he's targeting civil servants, when you talk about consolidated government expenditure, you are not just talking about civil servants. You are talking about these agencies, your SASA, your SANRA, your SARS. They are not being touched. He just gave a bailout again to South African Airways and Eskom with no conditions. They are not supposed to freeze wages. Like they did Eskom last year, they were given 23 billion. The 200 managers, the decision makers, the ones who are messing up the power utility, actually rewarded themselves. They paid themselves 4.7%. 300 million of that 23 billion went into salaries. So you have a situation where people who work for the SOEs are not being touched. People who work for state agencies are not being touched. People who work for municipalities are not being touched. But we are targeting public servants and civil servants. We are not going to have that.
Yeah. Let's break down that agreement that was reached. So we look at the agreement and now there's talk that that agreement is going to be broken. So talk to us about what was reached.
No, we don't have an agreement. We rejected. When they came to the PSCBC and they proposed that, we said, look, you're not serious. We're not talking. This is non-negotiable. We're not sitting around the table discussing this. So the meeting then collapsed because we're not going to compromise in 2018 because that was a compromise. If you remember when we signed this agreement, there was a push from workers to say, let's go on strike. We were understanding then of the economic circumstances and we said, look, we think this is a compromise position, especially because it was a multi-year agreement. So we said, let's sign a multi-year agreement. We'll have 3 years to figure out what to do going forward. Before the 3 years is over, now we're being told that government is actually undermining collective bargaining because this is a blatant attack on collective bargaining. So our position here is that this budget speech wasn't a budget speech for South Africans or a budget speech for workers. It was about ratings agencies, lenders, investors. Well, when we are done with this on the 1st of April, the minister will have to deliver another speech to his friends explaining that now he has a problem of labor instability because that is what is going to happen in the civil service.
We haven't seen a public service wage sector strike since, I think, 2010. We haven't seen one of those. Is this your threat, that if this does go ahead, you're going to shut down South Africa?
Definitely, yeah. But we're not going to mince our word. Our survival as the Federation is based on us protecting those members. There's a line in the sand on this one. We're not going to engage We're not going to the ANC. We're not going to any alliance meeting. We're not going to any PSCBC negotiation. We have an agreement. The agreement has to be implemented. If the agreement is not implemented, we're going to shut down the civil service. So there's no two ways about this.
Some, when you look at the numbers, and some analysis this morning speaks to, and this is a lot of money, that the wage bill actually eats at 35 cents of every single rand of government revenue. It's a high number. I mean, 35 cents already taken away for that public sector wage bill. Does it not need to come down? Do we not think we are over bloated there, and that does need to be trimmed down?
Well, like I was trying to explain earlier, that 35 cents you're talking about is not only going to nurses and teachers. Let us first talk about who designed the state the way it is. What is the role of SASSA, for an example? Who came out with the idea of SASSA? And what does SASSA do? SASSA doesn't pay social grants. Post Bank and Post Office pay social grants. SASSA manages a tender. So you've designed an institution. You run it following a corporate structure. You have a board. You have senior executives. They pay themselves these exorbitant perks. This is what you designed as government. Now, when you talk about this expenditure, that 35 cents you're talking about, it actually is spent on SARS, on SANRAL, on SASSA, and all these other agencies. Someone designed them because they were fragmenting the state. When they are talking about cutting the 35% we are talking about, they are not touching those. Here is our suggestion. You want to cut? Take SASSA back, absorb it back to the policy department, social development, and have a subdivision that is going to deal with social grants. Take SANRAL back. SANRAL doesn't build roads. SANRAL manages tenders of the private sector companies that build roads. So take that back into the department. Those are the suggestions that we are putting forward. But we are not going to have a situation where you design something. When it doesn't work, you don't go back to revisit your mistakes. What you do, you look for scapegoats and you attack workers, because that is what is being done here. And this distortion that this 35 cent you are talking about goes to public servants is a myth. This goes to municipal transfers. That's why we're raising this issue of consultants. These municipalities are spending billions on consultants. Yet last year, only 8 of them were able to account to the Auditor General. At the same time, on top of that, they underspent by 44 billion. So no one is talking about that. And you pretend as if that is not wastage. And that 35% is also part of the municipal transfers. So if you want to cut, maybe you need to look at what is happening in those municipalities and sort that mess out.
Yeah. This didn't come as a surprise to you, did it?
No.
I mean, this was alluded to already during the medium-term budget that was announced last year. The minister has said on numerous occasions we need to bring down this wage bill. He then went on to say that the union has been consulted in all of this, that unions are part of this, and that Public Service and Administration Minister Sizwe Pamla has been engaging with the unions. What have these engagements been like? What's been going on behind closed doors?
Well, they came. They said, look, we want to offer public servants 55 and above. We were targeting
early retirement.
Yes, early retirement, 30,000. We said, well, look, you are not going to have us partnering with you on that because we're opposed to that idea. Already, you have a situation where initially they said the public service was bloated. And then we said, well, look, let's talk the numbers here. In 1994, when the democratic state was put together, there were TPVC states, the apartheid state. There were 1.4 million public servants. When the tendering system was introduced in 1996, the public service was gutted to 960,000. Couple of decades later, we have a population now of 57 million. Yeah. At the time, it was 40 million. So this population has grown, but the public service has been shrinking. Currently, we have got 1,250,000 public servants. So the public service has
Say that again to me. We've got
1.250.
Okay.
Yes, public servants. So the public service has actually been shrinking since 1994. Now, you cannot look at this and say it is acceptable when we have a population that has grown from 40 million to 57 million. Yeah. Because what does this mean? It means that the teacher-student ratio is worsening. The nurse-patient ratio is worse today than it was in 1994. The doctor-patient ratio, the police officer-citizen ratio, because we do have a yardstick to measure whether the public service is bloated or not. Now, the figures tell you that it is actually not bloated. There are many vacancies that need to be filled. Some of them are funded. But since 2014, Treasury has decided not to fill most of these vacancies. So there's a lot of myth that is being recycled in the public domain. But the reality is that when you look at the numbers, all of these arguments, they fall flat as soon as you start to look at the numbers.
I know, and I mean, you've already explained this, but I want you to explain it again, and I want you to go into it because in reality, the wage bill is one of the biggest contributors to our gross national debt. And, you know, we now projecting that to be at 65% this year, which is, it's horribly high. It really is. And I mean, this is putting us in a very, very difficult situation. So as Cosatu, what do you suggest? What would you think is the best way for South Africa to get through this without cutting that wage bill?
Let's look at this budget. What was said to fix the SOEs? Nothing. There is no plan.
Just throwing money at it.
Yes. So that's your problem right there. Because you are spending money on SOEs, these entities. So what we have suggested is that...
That employ a lot of your workers.
They do.
So if you shut them down and you don't throw money at them, then they lose their jobs.
No, it's not a question of shutting them down. It's a question of merging some of them because there's a lot of duplication. Why do you have a state mining company and a state diamond company? Because you can merge the two. So what we have proposed is that come out with a plan, present it, and allow social partners to engage on it, on how to rationalize the SOEs and fix the state. The idea that we have got policy departments, we have agencies that manages tenders, and then you have got service providers, that on its own is wasteful expenditure. The issue of municipalities. You cannot allow a situation where you throw money to these municipalities. They are unable to account, including government departments. And yet you come out with solutions. What informed these solutions? Because you have no idea what they did with the money. So we agree. The state is the way it was designed, the neoliberal statecraft is flawed. So if you want to cut cost, let us have a conversation about how to revisit and sort out those design flaws. Because as Cosatu, we have been talking about this, the issue of outsourcing, for an example, the service level agreements that you sign with these service providers. We're sitting here, we're listening to Zondo Commission, we're being told of the nonsense that has been done over the last 2 decades. And yet, no one is having a conversation about what are these public-private partnerships about? The reason why is because this government is running a corporate welfare system where you don't touch anything that has got to do with the private sector. The consultants that are looting the state, currently, no one is talking about that. The public-private partnership, the outsourcing that we're seeing, no one is saying, maybe it's about time we revisit the tendering system. We talk about insourcing some of the services. By the way, when these were introduced, we were told they were going to bring about efficiency, we're going to cut cost. None of that is happening. And no one is saying, maybe this was a mistake. Let us start to revisit some of those decisions. Until we start to have those conversations, we're not going to allow any situation where workers are being victimized. Yeah. These workers were victimized when the apartheid debt was being paid after 1994. Because the reason why the public service was gutted, it was because government was prioritizing to pay the apartheid debt. A decade later, now they have their own debt. No, we're not having that. We are going to go back to insourcing the outsourced services, to revisit public-private partnerships, and to stop the corporate welfare that we were seeing, where you have Sanral handing over everything to the private sector, and they come back and ask for a bailout. You have SASA. We were talking here about the SASA tender with CPS.
Yeah.
We all witnessed that. No one is talking about that. These consultants, not only SOEs, it's government departments, it's municipalities. All of them, they're handing money to these consultants. Because this is a corporate welfare system, okay. No one wants us to have that conversation.
Right. I want to bring up quite a touchy issue as well, and that is, as much as you're there to protect the workers and to insist that their income is not affected, their jobs aren't affected, and yet you look at something like the PIC, that you're in support, that you use those PIC funds to bail out Eskom or to help Eskom. Now, I mean, that's almost throwing money into a pit, if you ask me. And, you know, for me, it doesn't make sense. These two don't weigh up. And other labor unions are against you for even suggesting that. So try and make me see the picture here. How could you be in support of that?
If I was listening, if you were putting it like that, I would also say no, I'm not supportive of that. But our proposal is not actually what you've just said now. What we have said here is, we said there's a 450 billion debt. Let's have a conversation. Let's first have a social compact. Labor, business, government, communities. Let's sit around the table. Is there a possibility that we can halve this debt, take half of this debt? We're not bailing out. We're investing in the power utility. Now, people have said, we are saying 250 billion should be paid by PIC. No, that's not what we said. We actually don't even know how much PIC will contribute, because we have a figure of 250 billion. What we need to talk about is how much of this 250 billion, how much government will contribute, how much private sector will contribute. So what we are saying is that let us buy ESCOM, let us invest in ESCOM, all of us, workers, community, and government. Now, we are having a conversation about that. And then we said, before we proceed with that, we are going to sit around the table and say, firstly, we want a new board where government, business, workers will be represented in that board so that we can influence decision making. And the first thing that we are going to do is to have a public forensic audit where we want to revisit all of the contracts and the transactions that have taken place, because we want to find out who are these gold suppliers and how did they get this contract. We want to revisit the IPPs. We want to do all of that. Once we have done that, we are going to have to deal with the people who are implicated. We are going to have to ensure that we attach their assets and we prosecute them. And after that, we are going to set new conditions. There are already 30 conditions in that proposal of Cosatu. We are going to have that skills audit that everyone is talking about. You say it's bloated, let us have a forensic skills audit. Let us find out so that we can have a conversation about how to fix the power utility. But our proposal is not a bailout. It is an investment. It is premised. It is predicated on conditions being fulfilled first. Okay. And we said we will meet every month at NETLEC to get reports on progress in terms of implementation of these conditions. Right. But there is no decision so far. It is only a proposal.
Okay. All right. So thanks for explaining that, and we'll keep that one. But what I want to do is also talk about, you speak about the minister is more worried about ratings agencies and foreign investors and all of that thing. But that brings in the money into a country. Now, one of the arguments and one of the discussions is that trade unions are partly to blame for investors' reluctance to want to come and work in South Africa, because they find it too difficult to deal with the unions, and that it just does not, it doesn't add to their business, it takes away. Well, what is your argument there, that unions are partly to blame for the lack of investment?
It's nonsense. It's nonsense that has been repeated. So it's tiresome, actually, to talk about it. Here's the situation. You have loose exchange controls. You have open borders. These people, they come in here, they gamble, they take their money, they leave. No one is stopping them. This is almost like a casino. This government now is undermining collective bargaining. We spent years with government and private sector colluding against the national minimum wage, trying to undermine it. In fact, the national treasury we have is the best national treasury that you could buy if you are a part of the big business, because it takes all of the decisions on behalf of business. Yeah. So it's a myth, the idea that unions are a problem in this country. You have a right to come, if you are an investor, to negotiate for an infrastructure, to negotiate incentives, tax incentives. You have every right, but you don't have a right to your own slaves. You have to ensure that you are ready to negotiate and pay decent wages to the people who have been carrying this economy on their backs. When you come into this country and you say this sector is developed, who developed this sector? It's South African workers who've been carrying this economy on their backs. So you can't come here and say you are happy with the South African mining sector, and then you pretend as if workers haven't actually built that sector. Mm-hmm. So you can go to government and ask for incentives, but you don't have a right to your own slaves. So that is nonsense. Mm-hmm. On ratings agencies, look, we agree. We understand the implications of us being downgraded. But we also should stop worshipping ratings agencies. Here is a country like Ethiopia, actually, that for a decade now has been growing at 8.5%. It has not received an upgrade. You look at Senegal, For a decade, it has grown by 6%. And it is still in junk status.
Yeah.
So while we need to do everything to sort out the ratings agencies, maybe our obsession should be about growing the economy and doing the right by South African people and the South African economy instead of worshipping ratings agencies. Because when everything has been said and done, he has delivered this speech. We still don't have electricity. We still have got 10 million people who are seated at home unemployed. We have 18 million people on welfare. Whether ratings agencies decide not to downgrade us, that doesn't pay the bills for the millions of South Africans who are lower income earners.
Indeed. As we wrap up, and I ask this very quickly of you, you have threatened war against government if they go ahead with trying to cut that public sector wage bill. Where to next? What is your plan?
No, look, we were very happy with the speech. When we came out of the PSCBC, we issued a statement. We made it very clear. We said, if he does proceed to announce this, he will have done half the job of mobilizing our members. So now he has done that. And this is not a Cosatu position, it's a labor position. The public service is 80% unionized. So we don't have to do a lot of work. All we have to do is to wait for the 1st of April. But we will start doing groundwork, explaining the outcomes of the PSCBC and engaging when it comes to budget processes. Cosatu recently concluded its Central Executive Committee meeting yesterday. Next week, we have PCs in all of our provinces. So we'll be reporting back to the members and we will be getting a mandate on how we proceed going forward.
Thank you for talking to us here on the program. Sizwe Pamla, Cosatu spokesperson, talking to us about Cosatu and the trade union's view that the 3-year agreement that was reached is non-negotiable and any attempt to review it would be unacceptable. All right, it's just gone 7 o'clock. Let's get your news to you.